Patrick Peters is responsible for client referrals. His short 5-minute presentation is on industry evolution towards sustainability. Now, I suspect his presentation will hinge perfectly on what the heads of government had to say to you this morning. Please help me to welcome Patrick Peters.
Good morning. Good morning, honorable prime ministers, honorable ministers, distinguished officials, colleagues, and friends. I'm sorry that I don't have a nice video to make us laugh a little bit, but I will first please allow me to turn my attention to each prime minister and all other elected officials, each CIU of the CIUs, each CEO of the CIUs, but also all other government representatives. I want to first allow me to sincerely thank each of you for joining us here today. Sometimes we, and by we I mean the private sector, sometimes we forget how special and unique it is to have the opportunity to interact directly with the policymakers and the executive decision makers. When I take a step back to think about that, I become very appreciative. I see a public sector that recognizes the importance of these programs. I see elected officials and decision makers who are dedicated to the long-term success of CBI. And I also see visionaries who understand that these programs are not just a necessity, but an opportunity. The fact that you, the public sector, choose to spend time with us, because we know how extremely busy you are and in high demand with so many priorities to juggle. But the fact that you actively choose to spend time with us at these conferences, but also engage with us on an ongoing basis, that reminds us that we're doing something on a daily basis that truly matters. This is a true PPP, a true public-private partnership with real-life consequences for hundreds of thousands of Caribbean nationals, and even millions if we go to the entire region. And this PPP, this partnership, increases the likelihood of the industry's sustainability, increases the likelihood of long-term success. So on behalf of the private sector, please hear me when I sincerely say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your ongoing collaboration. We recognize it and we appreciate it. So I had this whole speech prepared about the sustainability and integrity. Any math nerds, fellow math nerds would have appreciated its integrity. I had these formulas, but I woke up this morning and I changed my plan. I realized that I need to take advantage of this podium, of this microphone, of this platform, and I have a duty to my fellow private sector partners, some of whom are here in the crowd today. I have a duty to talk about the single most pressing issue to our colleagues overseas who travel to the markets and find the investors and convince them to invest in the region, convince them to invest in these programs. Right now, that pressing issue is my favorite saying: fast processing is your best marketing, or your best marketing is fast processing. To put a little bit of context, client referrals is the largest B2B service provider in the RCBI space. What that means is every day, my team and I, who are scattered in the crowd, we speak to dozens of RCBI specialists The people who are tasked to travel to the markets, everywhere from the US in the west to China in the east and everything in between, we speak to those people. Those people, those promoters, those RCBI firms, they decide where to spend their time, their energy, their resources, their marketing budgets to convince the investors, the applicants, whether to apply here in the Caribbean, whether to apply to the European Golden Visas, whether to apply to the North American residency programs, and the list goes on. And if you poll those people, those key drivers of the demand for these programs, if you poll all of them today, I promise you that the most pressing issue are processing times. It's no secret that the last 5 years demand for the Caribbean programs have increased tremendously, and that's fantastic. That's what we want. That has led to unstable processing times. And I'm not out here asking for anything unreasonable. I think the industry has matured enough. Our colleague from St. Kitts has mentioned it perfectly. We're in a new era of a mature industry. And us key players have understand that we're not out here asking for unreasonably fast processing times. We understand that the due diligence process needs time to take its course and be performed properly. What's key is the consistency. As the various units, if you decide that a 6-month processing time is reasonable, if that gives you enough time to perform the due diligence that is needed, please do everything you can to maintain that processing time in a stable manner. If it's 8 months, it's 8 months. We can live with that. We can understand that and set, but having the consistency allows us to set our clients' expectations, our sub-agents' expectations, and that snowballs into happy clients, happy sub-agents, and more clients. And then you won't get the spikes in volume, which subsequently lead to the spikes in application processing time, which subsequently lead to big problems. And big problems means a drop in volume, but if you talk to these promoters who are on the ground in these markets, a spike in processing time can also even mean a failed business, because a long processing time means a longer cash flow period. Just this year, a few months ago, I know a firm in Cairo, they had to close their doors because of cash flow problems. It can also lead to the sense of a lack of personal security. Let me paint a little picture. If you go to one of these countries and the client thinks that when you promised him that the approval would come in 6 to 10 months, now it's been 14 months, 15 months. This is one of the richest clients in their country, more resourceful, and they think you lied to them, that maybe you stole their money. You can't travel to that country, you're being threatened. And so your marketing activities stop. And though that stops the inflow of new applications to the region, to each country, and that's how you get these spikes and then these crashes of volume. So if somehow we can fix the unstable processing times, that would address, again, like I said, the #1 pressing concern for private industry at the moment. Anyways, I could talk for hours about this. I could talk about hours for integrity, stability, sustainability. I want it to be clear. I want it to be concise. That on behalf of private industry, not only do we thank you for your ongoing partnership, for your ongoing collaboration, but I do want to repeat one last time, my favorite tagline for the 5 CIUs is, your best marketing is fast processing. Fast processing is your best marketing. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Patrick Peters, their CEO of Client Referrals, a company that has raised several $1 billion to its B2B services since 1997. Our final keynote address before break this morning is from the Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Dr. Valder Henry, who will be speaking to us on regulation in Caribbean investment migration. Of course, the ECCB has been making the rounds throughout the ECCU, in fact, through the 5 participating countries to ensure a regional regulating body that is set up. We invite Dr. Valder Henry to the podium now. A round of applause for Dr. Henry. Just as a matter of housekeeping as well, ladies and gentlemen, if you need to use the restrooms, they're off to my left at the back. Just walk through, past the exit sign, and you shall see the rooms. So this is your thing. So the one in the sorry. This progresses and this goes back. Okay, just leave it to the general direction here. Is this tall enough?
It's good enough, I think. Good morning, Honorable Prime Minister Gaston Brown, Honorable Attorney General, Honorable Gaff Wilkins of St. Kitts and Nevis, leaders of the opposition, Mr. Malvin Joseph, all the chairs and heads of the CIP-CPI programs, and all distinguished guests here this morning, the media, good morning. This morning, my presentation is on regional economic developments and outlook for the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. So, what are my key messages? My key messages this morning, I'm not seeing it yet, but it's on. Okay, great, thank you. So my key messages this morning are: 1, the ECCU economic outlook for 2025 is positive, with a projected growth of 3%, primarily driven by tourism and the FDI-related constructions. While global inflationary pressures are easing, core inflation remains high, and the recent U.S. policy decisions, and we'll look at quite a few of them, including the tariffs, or particularly the tariffs, pose a risk for economic outlook. However, we will have some mitigating strategies for that. We are also positively pursuing reforms, including the easing of opening bank accounts. And just yesterday in the discussion, someone was talking about how difficult it is to open a bank account in our ECCU, yet so easy in the US and other parts of the developed world. And I know that this has taken effect as of 1st of April, and the bankers here can so confirm. The ECPGC that was established in around 2021, around the time of COVID, to provide partial guarantees for small businesses. And I'll show you how the ECPGC over the last few years have started really picking up stock and providing their guarantees, as well as our 2 new initiatives, the Office of the Financial Conduct and Inclusion and the Eastern Caribbean Financial Standards Body. I know our team has been out doing consultations with stakeholders across the ECCU. They've done 3 countries so far, and the remaining countries will be done to the end of June. And while maybe not fully our own initiative, ECCB is playing a critical role in the establishment of the Interim Regulatory Commission. And that commission has also been doing a lot of consultations to ensure that the voices of the various stakeholders are heard, and it will be embedded in the legislation going forward. So, what are we looking at? I know there's a lot of concern. You hear it on the radio, you see some articles being written, you also see some YouTube videos, some of it not fully comprehensive, not showing the real picture. So hopefully here the real picture will be shown, and then you can pass on that message to others. The economic outlook for 2025 is largely positive, while growth expected at 3%. In 2024, our growth was 3.2% and estimated, whereas in 2023, 3.6%. So yes, we've seen a decline, but considering the growth of the global growth rate of 2.2% to 2.5%, our 3% growth is positive, consider the global rate. Again, that growth of 3% is underpinned by the tourism industry, and that is expected to pick up, as well as the FDI construction. So as the CPI programs continue, and we heard from the Prime Minister of Grenada this morning that demonstrated the growth in terms of, and even the tourism sector, that most of these hotels now being built are fully funded by the CPI program. And that growth in construction, not just in Grenada, but I would think throughout our ECCU, is also expected to drive the growth. And so while that growth of 3%, however, is positive, considering the global situation, that growth is insufficient. It falls below the 5% as the minimum target set by our Monetary Council. The Monetary Council, made up of the Ministers of Finance, of the ECCU, and the highest governing body of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank that sets the policy direction, has indicated that 5% is the target rate of growth for the ECCU. And that is also to help. If you remember, some of you, in 2023, when we launched the 40th anniversary celebrations, Governor Antoine put out a challenge. What would it take to double our economies within the next 10 years? And we are still working on that, because that doubling of the economy will truly lead to the transformation of our ECCU, where persons do not just strive, but they thrive. And yesterday in the session with the Prime Ministers, and even this morning, PM Brown made this point, even speaking directly to the international partners here. And he said it so well again today, that this program is a lifeline for our people. This program is important and key for the transformation, so that our people's standard of living can increase. Because the truth is, if you are scrabbling to make a living, to make your ends meet, you can't wait for the next month, and even as the month ends, you're still in the negative, still in deficit. How does that lead to creativity? How does that lead to peace? And how does that encourage persons to grow and to develop? And it is critical, because peace of mind, which comes from economic and financial independence, is critical for the advancement of individuals and critical for the advancement of our ECCU. And so, very important for that. Again, while we are looking at growth, inflation is hovering, and it is in fact growing. While the target for the US is 2%, the figures in February show that it was 4.9%. We know that we are importers of inflation. Why? Because most of our imports come from the US. And so if inflation is high in the US, it's going to be high for us. And with the tariffs, the increase in tariffs, it will in fact increase inflation. It will in fact increase the cost of living. And while there is a need, or even President Trump, because in January he had the statement that the Fed should reduce interest rates, the truth is, with inflation looming high, the prospects of interest rates declining is slim to zero. And so it's a counter a policy that does not align with the goals necessary. However, all of that notwithstanding, I want to say that in our region, and that is particularly for the investors, there are actually no foreign currency limitations in the ECCU. So you can withdraw, you can go to the bank and ask for how much US dollars, pounds that you desire. You can repatriate your returns, although we'd expect you to keep some of these profits within the countries for further growth and development, but there are no restrictions. And we have a very well-performing financial sector. It is well integrated. We have a regional securities market that is well functioning, from which our governments are able to secure funds at relatively good rates, because sometimes the auction actually goes for 2% and 2.3%, which enables the government to help to close some of the deficits that it has. And again, I like to say that I think in the ECCU, we have the strongest currency. And I know there are some questions, and even yesterday, one of the bankers asked me, because she had been asked by some of her customers, and persons asked the question, what's going to happen to our currency with all of these issues with the tariffs and so on? I want to assure you today that our Eastern Caribbean currency dollar is strong. Our Eastern Caribbean currency dollar is one of the strongest, if not the strongest currency in this world. Our currency has been pegged from 1976, 2.7169 to the US dollar. The legislation determines and stipulates that we must be pegged to 60%. That means for every dollar, we must have 60 US cents in reserves. We have never come close to that minimum. In fact, the Council has determined that we should never be below 80%. But I'm pleased to advise that we have never even gotten to 80%. Even during COVID and all of the challenges, and even in the financial market and the upheavals in the 2000 to 2021-22 era, the lowest we got to was 89.63% thereabout. As of February and as of last week, we're at 98.3%. And that means for every EC dollar in circulation, we have 98 US cents in reserves. So our reserves would have to be truly compromised for our currency to be devalued. And so persons are also asking, the US dollar is falling against other major currencies. How does that show up for us? In fact, if it continues to fall and fall drastically, it would be to our advantage, because then it maybe now means we need to now negotiate that peg of 2.7169. Okay, good. I spoke about that already, so I'm moving nicely along to, yeah, sorry. I kind of went ahead of myself, so also spoke about that, so I'm also moving along nicely here. So great. So now we come to what are some of our recent reforms in the ECCU, and I've mentioned that, ease of opening bank accounts, and I'm happy to report that has been done. The ECPCGC, as I spoke to you, and I'm just showing some numbers here in terms of the ECPC, that so far the loans granted is $19.4 million with guarantees of $14.8 million. And we show in terms of the countries that have used it, it's 6 of our 8 countries, with the largest number of loans approval being going to Grenada, with 54 approvals for a loan total of $5.3 million and guarantee of $4.4 million. But the highest value, St. Lucia, with 38 approvals, 6.7 loan value, and approval of 5.1, and then this is followed, I believe, in terms of numbers and value value by St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Well, number is 39, but 3.9 to 2.9. Then Antigua, then Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis having the lowest percentage. So again, we see that growth, encouraging small businesses to grow and to expand, and also help in terms of our thriving. And then our Office of Financial Conduct. And I think this is really important and comes at a timely time. As our sector consolidates, the banking sector consolidates, I'm sure you've heard the concern, I'm sure you too may have concern. We have no choices, and because we have no choices or limited choices, then the banks may increase rates, have more fees, and to the disadvantage of the customer. And so the OFCI will come in, while yes, we regulate the LFIs, but in terms of market conduct, according to the legislation as of now, they advise your fees, but we don't regulate fees. OFCI will help to address some of that for market conduct supervision for the LFIs and a mandate for financial inclusion and literacy. We want persons to enter into this space. Governor Antoine also always says the financial sector must work for all except the bad actors. And so it means we can't have systems that is so geared to prevent the bad actors, but then it excludes good actors. It must be such that the bad actors are the ones who get excluded and the good actors get in. And we know the stories. In fact, just recently on Facebook, there was a story of a 18-year-old trying to open a bank account because he had won a prize and wanted to deposit that fund in his own account, and the difficulties he had in opening that account. All of that will be addressed. And then we have the Eastern Caribbean Financial Standards Body, and that deals mainly with the non-bank financial institution, pension funds, insurance, the credit unions. And so they are regulated now nationally, not by the ECCB, but that ECFSB will be this like regional body for the regulation of the non-bank financial institution, because it is critical. The NBFI also play a critical role in the financial stability of our region. In some countries, the credit unions are actually the largest financial institution, or the second largest. We have pension funds and we have insurance companies that take investments. We know of the BICO-CLICO situation. So the ECFSB will help to address some of those issues for the strengthening of our financial sector and the stability of our region. So, I'm speaking without moving my slides, sorry. So, yes, so I know the issues right now and the talk around the tables in cafes, among, the leaders, among, individuals, the business community, and even the common man on the road, are all of these U.S. changes in policies that took effect come January 20th, 2025. And what are the implications for us? So, it's not just for us, globally. I often say that, we complain that if maybe one of our leaders maybe make a decision that we think is maybe not the best, it generally impacts just our own country, our little region. With the US is global impact, and we've started seeing that. Just recently, the World Bank and the IMF have reduced their growth rate for the global to 0.2%. Consumer sentiment in the US is down 16%. The global uncertainty, that index has also risen. And of course, the inflation expectations have increased, especially given the February numbers of 4.9. So how do you say does that impact us? Well, those factors impact us in many ways. One, we know the position taken by climate change by the current President Trump, and that has implications, because as I said last year at a conference I attended on climate change, some people speak about climate change, but they write about climate change. But in the region, we live climate change. We see the impact. The Prime Minister of Dominica, PM Scarrett, my own Prime Minister, what did he say? With Maria that took place, and I witnessed it, I experienced it in 2017, wiped off our economy 264%. We know what that is. In Grenada and St. Vincent, just last year. And so, with climate change and no one is taking responsibility, the evidence or the occurrence or the probability of greater hurricanes, stronger hurricanes, it impacts us. Of course, power rivalry. And we see it, all of what's going on now, we're going to have less funding coming to us because it's going to be diverted and our other person is going to step into the fray. Probability of that is also zero. Again, with all of these tariffs, increased costs for us. As it increases our costs, it has less funds, and our debt ratio will also go up, and our debt obligations, less fund for critical social projects and projects for growth of the economy taking place. And then tourism, which is what I said to you, the growth of 3% underpinned by two main factors, tourism and the construction by FDI. And with all of these increases, the potential or the probability of tourism declining is high. Because as persons have to spend more on their disposable income becomes less, and as your disposable becoming less, what happens? Vacations become a dream rather than a reality, or you look at cheaper options for your vacation. So those are some of the ways in which it will impact us. However, it's not just doom and gloom. We have a few caveats here. Yes? Despite all of that, we are still positive. And in fact, one of the key things I will take from this CIS 2025 is the positive outlook of our leaders. Because even while we are here discussing the changes and all of the threats to the CIP or the CBI programs, our leaders have been hopeful. They've sent out a message that while it may evolve, that program will remain. Even in terms of how we market it and we position it. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Dominica, PM Scarrett, said to us, oftentimes we sold it in the past as for visa-free access. But you notice what it's now looking at is investment migration. Opportunities for investment rather than just visa-free. So all of these things will help in terms of the caveats. And so, diversification of our tourism markets has become key. Can't just depend, and I think all of that's happening is the need for diversification. And that lesson or message is not new to us, in the region. When we depended, say, in Dominica on bananas and some of the Windward Island, sugar in the Leeward Islands, there was always the call for diversification. And we need to begin to diversify earlier rather than later. We ought not to wait until it reaches the last moment, but recognize that that has to be part of our frame. What are our options? Never being complacent. And I think that is a lesson that is deeply rooted in our region from our experiences. The need for deepening our regional integration and market integration. And the way our 5 CBI countries have come together in terms of collaborating, harmonizing, This is a platform that they can use for other areas. In fact, yesterday, the CEO of the CPI program right here, Mrs. Donovan, before she gave her opening remarks, she wanted to make that point. And also the CEO of the Dominica program, Ms. Johnson, also made that point, that collaboration. And we need to extend that collaboration, and true collaboration, that when we agree something, when we leave the meeting, we don't do something differently, but continue to work together, speaking with one accord. Actively engage and negotiate. And all yesterday and today, that's the call put out by our leaders. Honorable Brown was very forthright when he said, and even today he said it again, you may see these programs as corrupt and so on, but for us it's a lifeline. And not only is it a lifeline, we have taken steps to ensure the integrity of the program is maintained. Program becomes stable and becomes sustainable. And in 2023, when the U.S. met with our leaders and they outlined the 6 areas, our countries have worked assiduously and continue to work assiduously in meeting those terms to demonstrate the urgency and the importance that you are listening to you, but you too need to listen. It's a two-way thing. It cannot just be one side because you have the bigger voice or the bigger purse, but recognize that our countries too are sovereign nations and should be treated with that same level of respect. Again, now the need maybe to promote South-South cooperation, and we see that happening now with greater moves, and Barbados maybe has taken the lead on that in terms of establishing relationships with Africa, trade relationships and other relationships, and Latin America. And of course, they need to enhance our energy security because it is so critical in terms of renewable energy. And then fiscal responsibility and sustainability financing. Prime Minister again spoke about that this morning. And in fact, all the prime ministers who were there spoke about that. And the different funds that they have in place to provide that resilience so that the countries can not just bounce back, but the countries can bounce forward. And those are all steps in the right direction. Promote investment in our key sectors. Food and nutrition security, I always say it's not just about food security. It has to be about nutrition security, which is our health. Critical, because health costs are very expensive. And we need to see this. A few years ago, Honorable Joseph Moore and Joseph Friend, there was this conference. And when we were talking about the NCDs, and seeing NCDs not just as a health issue, but also as an economic issue because of the cost of dealing and treating with NCDs. And then innovation and technology. AI is here, digital transformation and all of that. We too have to ensure that we provide that opportunity for the development and growth of our nation. And so I want to end on a positive note to show that even if there are all of these challenges, opportunities exist. My father used to always say to us, do not see challenges as problems. See challenges as opportunities waiting to be discovered. And if that is the mindset, it means, and he always used to say to us, we have only 24 hours to lament about any problem or situation we find ourselves in. After 24 hours, we have to go to him for a solution or solutions. And it's the same thing here. How do we get into this growth mindset to say, yes, there are challenges, but out of every challenge, there are opportunities. How do we see the opportunities for our countries? How do we see the opportunities and transform these opportunities to truly lead to the transformation of our region? And so, while yes, I said to you, travel is maybe a risk factor, persons may travel less, but there's another market where persons want stability and peace. And so we then promote not just sea and sand, we then promote our tranquility, our peace, our good social. So that means we also have to work on our crime and other social issues and ills to ensure that we can then market in these areas. Regional coordination, and negotiation, and I spoke about that already, one voice. There is strength in numbers. And if the 5 countries come together, or 8 countries come together, and we've seen it happen, where because of that unity among our leaders, that we are able to get persons to revisit some things. And it is that unity why we are even here today with all of these partners. And that one voice has to remain. Strength in numbers. Because if one of us falls, all of us falls. So if one of us prosper, all of us will prosper, and that is it. And then of course our diaspora. How do we take better use of them? How do we, use them in terms of even mentoring and coaching and building that generational and closing that generational divide between our older persons and the younger ones, and those who've also gone away and have acquired knowledge, technology, and even financial resources. How do we also make our countries a place where they too can feel welcome and can contribute to the growth of our nation? And then, of course, ultimately, it also rests with us, each person individually, to ask the question, what am I doing to prosper my country? What am I doing to double my own wealth, so that in doubling my own wealth, we double the GDP of our country? What am I doing to serve the underserved, to reach the underbellies of our communities? Because truly, we cannot move forward if we leave a whole bunch of persons behind. And each of us, we each have a responsibility. One of my favorite songs is Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. If you want a better word, if we want to be able to withstand the challenges, it starts with me. And what do I do? How do I use my own good office? How do I use the resources that I have, the skills and the talents, to bring someone else along and thereby help to combat their own personal challenges and ultimately that of our nations and that of our region? We are brilliant, we are strong, we are resilient and adaptable. And we have the answers. Let's grow our own confidence. Let's not be afraid to shine. Let's not be afraid to stand out for what we know is for the best for our nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry, and of course, safe flight. We know you have to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our first break of the day. We will take 10 minutes. We right here will resume at 11:35 for our next